And we are live. So welcome to the meeting.
All right. So thank you everybody so much for joining. We are happy to have you here. I'll quickly introduce myself and then dig into the agenda. First up, we want to make sure to flag for you that this is a public meeting, and as such, that means this meeting is being recorded as well as live streamed, and this recording will be posted on the Athens-Clarke County website. So this is an overview of all of our members. We are very thankful to have. Yes.
Megan, can I interrupt for just 1 second? Oh, I did, because I have news or information that I just learned like 10 minutes ago. You can follow this same YouTube link because this is a live YouTube broadcast. You can follow the link at any point, even after once the broadcast is closed out, which should be shortly after the meeting ends. We will be posting the link to the YouTube as well on our website, but you can keep that and you will know that it's live and ready to review. Okay, right. Sorry, back to you, Megan.
Oh, so that's great. It makes it that much easier to find. All right, so thank you. This is just an overview of all the organizations represented through our Citizens Advisory Board. We're very thankful for your participation and to have such a diverse group. Partners on the CAB are indicated in the white box below. In the green, you'll see Southface and Greenlink are listed. We are two technical consultants supporting in the development of Athens' 100% Clean and Renewable Energy Action Plan. And in the middle there, you'll see the Athens-Clarke County logo. We're glad to have multiple departments represented today on this call. So just to lay out a quick agenda, we'll be going through our objectives, intros, and some housekeeping. And then further on, we're going to be identifying the upcoming milestones ahead and review processes associated with the materials that we're going to be putting in front of you throughout this process. Following that, we're really excited for the meat of today's presentation to focus on an introduction to the Advanced Clean Energy Scenario, or ACES, energy modeling tool that was developed by Greenlink Analytics. This is the culmination of over 6 months of work putting together a tool that will help chart out pathways for what it's going to take to get to 100% clean and renewable energy for Athens-Clarke County. Then we're going to follow that with a discussion amongst ourselves about how best to use this tool as we're moving forward, both in our own planning on the CAB, as well as when we're working with the public to identify priorities that we want to make sure are highlighted within the plan. So with that, we're going to start with some introductions amongst the CAB. I will save the city staff and the consultant staff to the end of the intros. So let's go ahead and go through and have everyone identify their name and organization. And as we're doing this by way of roll call, we'll be dropping a link in the chat similar to what we did last month to a Google Sheet that will also let you just populate your name and organization if there are multiple people. So with that, Mike, would you mind going down the roll list you can see in terms of participants and pull out people so they can do intros?
Okay, Amy, you're first on my list.
Okay, Amy Cassane. I'm the Corporate Citizenship Coordinator for WNA Engineering.
And caller user 3, is that Charles? I'm not sure who our callers are.
Charlie Glodanis with the Athens Housing Authority.
And then there's a user number 4, which is a 678 number.
Mike, that's probably me. Lisa Bianchi Passati from Southface. I had to dial in via phone. Apologies.
No problem. I have a 706-425 call-in number.
That's Charlie again.
Okay. And then John?
I think you mean me. Yes, with John with Troma Construction, representing the Athens Area Home Builders Association.
And Michael?
Yes, I'm Michael Songster, and I'm here representing 100% Athens Renewable Energy Initiative.
Shane?
Shane Blackwell, President of Northeast Georgia Business Alliance.
Tom?
Tom Lawrence. I'm representing the Athens U.S. Green Building Council, and my day job is on
A participant has joined the meeting.
Engineering faculty at UGA.
Okay, who else on the cab group is did I leave out? Somebody just joined? Caller number 6706. I'm sorry.
This is Crystal Coburn. Hi, Mike. This is Crystal Coburn, Inclusion Officer.
She's with Athens-Clarke County. Let's see. Tawana, you were on here. There you are.
Yes, I'm sorry. I hit something. I couldn't find the meeting again. I can hear you. Tawana Matters. I'm Athens Land Trust. Happy to be here.
All right, and so for the Athens-Clarke County staff, I'm Mike Wharton out of Sustainability Office. And
hi, everyone. I'm Maggie Songster. I'm working as a sustainability consultant with the Athens Office of Sustainability.
Hi, I'm Monica McGee. I'm with, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Monica McGee. I'm the Assistant Director for Athens Land Trust.
I'm Andrew Saunders. I'm with the Central Services Department of Athens-Clarke County. We manage facilities and fleet, which will be pretty important through this process.
I'm Ilka McConnell. I'm with Athens-Clarke County Economic Development.
Melinda Lord. I'm with the Athens-Clarke County Housing and Community Development Department.
Is that all the Athens-Clarke County and the CAB members? And okay, South Face and Greenlink?
Sure, I'll kick it off. I'm Lisa Bianchi-Passati, the Policy and Sustainability Services Director at South Face. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Bailey Shea from South Face. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here.
So Yo, you want to go next?
Absolutely. I'm Yo Rung Ji. You can call me Yo. I'm Director of Urban Initiatives at Greenlink. Good to be here with y'all.
And Matt, we saved you for last.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Cox. I'm the CEO and founder of Greenlink Analytics.
So did we leave anybody out? Because all I have is kind of my list isn't very good that I see down the side. So if I left anybody out, my apologies, and just let us know. And otherwise, Megan, you can start. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Glad you're here. Yeah. Next up, in terms of objectives, we're going to go ahead and give you an update of progress to date. We're going to give a preview, a look ahead of the focus of CAB meetings over the next year, outline a process for CAB review and feedback of the inputs and materials we're getting, share findings of the energy modeling analysis we discussed, and then our takeaways for today that we'd like to make sure we all have are an adoption of the feedback process we're going to lay out, gather your initial responses to the modeling tools we're presenting on today, and have a continued discussion around those tools that will kick off moving forward and identify the milestones ahead for future CAB meetings. So by way of housekeeping, I'll just recap last month's CAB meeting. That was essentially our kickoff. It reviewed the purpose of the CAB, the commitments associated with CAB participation, and we discussed some logistics around how to engage at extraordinary times. And we went ahead and kicked off a review of the mailers, radio, PSA, and website content that was circulated post-CAB. Now we'll go through milestones and review process. This is a look ahead, and I'll say this is over 2 slides. This one's more topic specific, but stay tuned for the next slide in a moment, of the milestones on the horizon, which is to indicate tentative topics of focus as we move forward with our CAB meetings. So you'll see in September 2020, we've indicated one ad hoc meeting. That's the first one. That's basically we're going to propose later in this meeting scheduling a follow-up for anyone interested on the modeling tool we'll be reviewing for any kind of further discussion. And then what we've identified moving forward from there are so far just the formally scheduled CAB meetings. And these are the topics we've laid out going through. Next month, we'll focus on reviewing our proposed public engagement strategy and then follow up with a list of potential stakeholders and strategies for y'all to review in the coming months. We'll try to finalize that process through our October CAB meeting, and we'll also begin a series of deep dives that are focused on topics of concern and consideration for this plan. So we'll start with a bit of an intro around buildings and energy, which is a huge portion of the way that we'll get to 100% clean and renewable energy in Athens. And from there, we'll move on to the following month of housing and energy burden. The end of the year, for December, we'll just recap what we've done this year and also look ahead to action items in the next year. In January, we're planning to focus on transportation. February, clean energy economy. By that, we mean green jobs, economic development, anything we can think of in that category that's of interest. And we're going to leave March TBD for now. And based on how our process goes over the next several months, if there are any topic areas that we collectively feel need to be covered before we start talking about policies and prioritization to go into the plan, we'll use our March time to address those outstanding matters. And then April is when we start taking all of the input we've received through our own conversations, through our stakeholder process, and through our discussions around policy to start prioritizing what policies should really go into the plan, what order they should be adopted in. And that's really going to help inform the development of the plan itself. On the next slide, this is the few months after that that pertain mostly to iterations of the plan. So May, we'll review the draft plan with you, which will also be shared with you for you to be able to review in advance, and dedicate the rest of the year on addressing revisions, reviewing a final plan, and preparing for what's currently scheduled as an August presentation to the City Commission. You'll note at the bottom that if there are additional topics that you'd like to discuss, please contact Mike and Maggie around that. We know that this is a lot of information, a lot of policies, a lot of topic areas that we're going to have to address in the next year, and we want to make sure that we're addressing all of them as we're going forward with this. So please don't hesitate to let us know. What we will be doing upon the launch of the public engagement process, which we're going to be reviewing and planning through with you in September and October, is we're going to be posting a Google Sheet, a spreadsheet to our CAB folder that identifies essentially every meeting that's going to be happening, both our regularly scheduled CAB meetings, as well as things like stakeholder meetings, community, town hall style meetings, or otherwise, so that you guys can monitor them and opt in when appropriate if you have interest. So the 2 items at the top, I'm just going to say those are real meetings, and the rest are just, or the 3 items are, and then the bottom 2 are just examples of the kinds of content that's going to be populated once we start getting things in order and scheduled. And that's a document that's going to be available to you through that folder. Now I'm just going to touch on the public engagement and plan development. We wanted to make sure to today tee up a little bit of this thinking and then really dig into it next month around how we're going to be incorporating the feedback from our stakeholder processes and from our CAB conversations into the development of the content of the plan. So you'll see there are a lot of feedback loops associated here between the community, which we're defining as residents and community members, that provide insight into themes, focus areas, concerns, and general input as it applies to more of like the individual or family level of the community. Then for stakeholders, those are sector-specific groups, businesses, and institutions that provide insight into group-level priorities and concerns. We'll be conducting processes around both community and stakeholder engagement. Then you'll see those go back and forth to the CAB that will be reviewing the consolidated feedback that we'll be collecting and sharing with you. And you'll be providing guidance to us on how to react to that, as well as ACC Gov is going to be discussing and evaluating it and taking all of these considerations into policymaking process. And we'll work with all of y'all in South Face in compiling and drafting the plan for consideration. In terms of review process for this particular slide, I'm not speaking about the plan document itself so much as about all of the materials that are going to be put in front of you as we're moving forward. These might be things such as briefing memos or info sheets, or they might be scripts or sample flyers or a plan draft. We want to make sure that we're conveying expectations very clearly around follow-up action. So we've kind of identified 3 potential types of action associated with these materials we'll be sending your way. So one is just informational only. We're sending it to you as an FYI. You can do what you need to with it. Next up is comment requested. So we'd like your feedback on materials. And then the third potential option is decision required. So that we're indicating which of those 3 we consider a document we're sharing with you to be. We're going to always send a cover sheet to accompany whatever we're sending your way, letting you know which of these 3 actions applies to that piece of material and providing a due date if that's applicable to the action associated with it. And these will be, any comments or reviews you have can be sent to this email inbox, which is Maggie's, and to Mike as well. And ACC Gov will compile this feedback and upload summaries to the CAB folder. This is basically a flowchart summarizing everything I just said, with iterating this is a continuous loop of feedback and process. So send any
Megan,
feedback you have.
Can you go back one for just a second? I don't mean to interrupt the flow, but we thought this might be helpful in communicating to the CAB kind of those things that are coming through that we would need back. And what we're seeing out of this is, as you send these materials back to Maggie and myself, we will then compile those into a single response and share those responses back out with everybody so that we can facilitate the discussion among CAB members and among ourselves, instead of everybody trying to work on one document. We'll be able to put all of the information together in a single document. So hopefully it will make the flow of information a little bit easier to follow and a little bit easier to comment on.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike, just real quick, I see a question from one of the members requesting when will the information be shared? Do we have a timeline for that?
Sure.
We were looking at this as, I'm sorry, this is really kind of what we learned, a lesson learned for us as we sent out the request concerning the radio PSAs and those types of things. We really felt like what we needed to do is kind of set a process that would make it facilitate everybody making comments and sending them out. So that's kind of a general comment on how we want to proceed with handling information into the future. And we're really, honestly, we're just trying to make it a little easier on everybody to know what to comment on and when, and how all of that, what everybody else is saying in one place. So you're not having to search through 20 emails in your email box, which I can relate to perfectly, or for some of you, it's 100 emails in your email box. So we want to do a better job of putting the information in a single place for the topic of interest, so you can go to it, we can have the feedback, and then we can get that incorporated a lot more smoothly, a lot smoother and quicker. So that's what we were looking at is a more of a formal process rather than, or I should say a more consolidated process, rather than addressing a specific piece of information at this point.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Mike. Right. So now, and I'm recognizing we're going a little slowly or a little quickly through the agenda, so that can open up some time for additional discussion, but also do continue to let us know if you have questions as we're going into this, if it's relevant to touch on as we're touching on the topic. Otherwise, there is plenty of time allotted towards the end for discussion. So now I'm going to hand things over to Matt and Yo from GreenLink Analytics that will be providing an overview of the ACES energy modeling tool. And actually, when I say now, I mean after I read the next slide. So then I will hand it over to them. Just to tee this modeling analysis up, we want to acknowledge that what we're about to put in front of you is a lot of information. It's 6 months worth of work in data analysis and modeling. And so today is meant to be the start of a conversation on really putting this analysis to work. So Matt and Yo will go through a presentation on this, and then we're going to follow up that presentation with a conversation that kind of addresses these preliminary questions I've laid out here that I wanted to tee up just initially so you'll have them back of mind as we're going through the next 20 or 30 minutes of ACES. And then we're going to tee these back up individually after their presentation to really talk through each of these items. I do want to say that we are planning to schedule for anyone interested on this call a follow-up conversation sometime between now and the September CAB that will allow time for a more informal conversation around these materials. And we'll be sending follow-up materials on the ACES modeling and the utility burden modeling that's also going to be presented as part of that to you for your review between now and that conversation. And we'll also be sending a form after this call that will provide some opportunities after you've had a chance to think about this. If you have other topics of discussion or items to contribute on these topic areas, this will be a consolidated process where you can populate that information and send it our way. We'll compile all the feedback we get and post it to the CAB, just as Mike was outlining we'll be planning to do with any other materials. So with that, these initial framing questions are, what are your initial reactions to what's being presented? What about these resources resonates with you the most from the point of view that you're bringing to this CAB? And then what about these resources do you think are really going to resonate with the members of your community? And then finally, just how should we really make the best use of this resource as we're talking to stakeholders through our public engagement work? And now I will hand it over to Matt and Yo from Green Lake. And Matt, Yo, just let me know when to flip through slides for you. All right, Matt, Yo, are you still there?
I think Matt is trying to present and he's having a little bit of audio trouble. I see him waving.
Oh, okay.
Okay. While he figures that out, I will say hello and thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So GreenLink Analytics is a team based out of Atlanta. We do a lot of climate modeling and we work with some great folks on this call on the Atlanta Clean Energy Plan. We're excited to be doing the work with Athens. We are a small but growing team. So we have Matt Cox, CEO and co-founder, who is working out his technical issues, as you can hear clearly. And you have Eitan Gummerman, senior energy consultant and the director of urban initiatives. We have Kevin, who's our chief data scientist, and Sam McDonald, who's our energy policy analyst, who have been working on this, developing this model for ACES that you'll learn more about in just 1 second. Our motto is using data for good, and we're excited to be applying it here. So given all that, Matt, are you back online or still trying to get back in?
Matt is showing up is unmuted on my end.
All right, maybe we'll go to the next slide for now.
All right, he did just message me to say he's logging out and logging back in, so hopefully that'll fix the issue.
Sure. So GreenLink Analytics has spent the past 6 months working with the Athens group in South Face on developing a couple of different things. First, we take a look at state and local energy data just to see where Athens and Georgia currently is as far as clean energy and goes for our state. The second part is looking at a rooftop solar analysis, so really looking at solar potentials for Athens. The third part is doing a deep dive into an ACES model development. And then we'll talk just a little bit about utility burden and electricity and utility bills for Athens, but we'll do a deeper dive for that in November. I think Matt has just joined the meeting again. Are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yay, yes.
Yeah. All right,
Excellent.
cool. Well, go ahead and continue. I don't need to try to take back over.
No, it's okay. Perfect timing. If you could go to the next slide. So, want to tee it off with state and local data, Matt?
Sure thing. So this is a snapshot of what the electricity supply is projected to look like for Athens between now and 2035. What you can see here is that if you're tracking the colors, coal is on its way out. It's shrinking, but it's still there by 2035. Nuclear is increasing its presence. Gas is coming down a little bit. Solar is growing quite a bit, and hydro stays about the same. The major takeaway for this is that Georgia Power is currently getting about 8% of their energy from renewables. They're not the only supplier in Athens-Clarke County, but they are the one that generates pretty much all of the supply that comes into the community. And obviously, only less than a quarter is what we would consider clean in terms of being renewables by 2035. That's not enough to achieve a 100% target. If we go to the next slide, we'll be able to see a little bit more here. So this is a look at the current emissions for Athens. And so business as usual is a term here that we use to mean what things look like without, with current policies, current trends in place, but we're not changing any of that. So it's really things that we can easily foresee without changes in policy. Where does that get us? The current emissions, you can see the largest single sector is transportation, and that's expected to maintain under a business as usual projection out to 2035. And that's actually dominated by single passenger vehicles as well. The residential and the commercial sectors are almost even with each other. And then industrial has the smallest footprint. As we look at the emissions by fuel, you can see that electricity is the biggest source of emissions today and is expected to remain so. Although it is expected to decline, it's coming down about a third. Gasoline is second and is expected to decline a little bit. Diesel and natural gas are expected to remain fairly static. If we head to the next slide. So this is our estimate of how much money is being spent on energy that is leaving Athens each year. And the major takeaway here is that it's almost $500 million a year is leaving the community to buy energy. And you'll see today, the biggest single expense there is gasoline. So gasoline's first, electricity is just behind it, and then diesel and natural gas are pretty trailing third and fourth entities. That's expected to change. So that's one of those that's, that the models are showing us will flip. Under business as usual, the total amount of money that leaves Athens-Clarke County each year goes up to about $600 million by 2035. And the biggest change there is that power bills increase. So the cost of electricity will go up, and that's expected to be the biggest driver of the increase in overall expenditures, as well as the money leaving the community. The next slide will give us a bit of detail around getting to 100%. And so the commission in Athens has passed the resolution to get to 100% clean energy. And then how we've translated that into our modeling as shown in this table on the right. So energy efficiency, whether it's coming from electric or natural gas, that counts towards hitting the target. Solar generation counts, wind power would count. Energy storage in the model is always connected to solar, so that's counting as well. It's just extending when we can use solar. Renewable energy credits are included as a way to get to the target. Nuclear and biomass are not counted as clean or renewable energy. And then on the transportation side, we have inputs here around CAFE standards, so vehicle fuel efficiency, electric vehicle adoption rates, alternative commute modes. So this is really, can we push people more towards cycling or pedestrian modes? And then clean public transit. So there's also an ability to look at electrifying buses, for example. And there's quite a bit of that activity already underway. The next slide will give us a sense of some of the work that's been done so far. So this was looking at the rooftop solar potential for the local government's properties. And so the analysis here is giving, each rooftop is getting a score. They've been assessed for technical and economic potentials. So from a technical standpoint, that means that we're taking a look using satellite and LiDAR imagery data to say, what's the angle of this rooftop? Is it shaded? Is it likely to be shaded in the future? Is there enough room to support a solar installation on this rooftop? The economic analysis then takes a look at what the building is currently paying for electricity and different financing models to pay for the solar that could be installed. And then that produces the series of outputs that you see here, where the best opportunity has got about a 5.5-year payback period and would have a very nice net present value through direct purchase, and would represent about a 36% energy saving. This serves as a useful way for us to kind of tee up the thought process that goes behind the rest of the model, in addition to showing some of the work that's been done looking at the local government's building stock. But our approach is generally to take a look at a technical potential. What would technology and buildings or vehicles tell us could be done, to funnel that down through an economic perspective to say, well, this is the amount that would be cost effective to achieve. So this will have a benefit cost payback, the benefit cost ratio of greater than 1. And we generally assign that within a certain number of years because people have a little bit of a recency bias. And so there's a threshold on the commercial side that we generally are looking for things that will pay back 3 to 4 years. On the residential side, it's normally pegged at about 5 years, maybe 7 for certain technologies. And then lastly, we do a final funneling using an achievable potential, which is a further reduction to acknowledge that there are administrative and transaction costs that may make it so that the full value of the economic potential is pretty unlikely to ever actually be achieved. So when we talk about potentials, if we say 100%, what we mean is we've captured 100% of that achievable potential. So it's already been narrowed quite a bit from technical to cost effective to that achievable level. If we look at the next slide, we will see a little bit about the ACES tool. So the Advanced Clean Energy Scenario Tool is a technology that we have developed at GreenLink. It builds off of our Athenia model, which is a deep learning model that evaluates the consumption, the supply, and the demand of energy on an hour-by-hour basis. And it uses a lot of historical information to train and test the model. And then once it's doing a good job predicting history, we use it to forecast the future. And so we've done that to create hourly estimates of supply and demand for Athens out through 2035. And then this tool allows us to manipulate that, to say that we want to increase certain amounts of energy efficiency beyond that business as usual, no new policy case. We want to bring more solar into the marketplace. And so it sets a boundary for us to play within, create our own scenarios, and see what the effects are. And so the effects that we're able to track, they're going to modify energy demand. As a result, there's going to be a change in emissions. So we can see the impacts on greenhouse gas emissions. We see the impact on pollutants that cause a variety of public health problems. And we monetize those. So you see what the differences are between different scenarios that way. We see what the cost of utilities will be. So does this change rates? And if so, higher, lower, what's the impact going to be for people who are able to access whatever clean energy programming is put together versus those who are not? There's economic development components around job creation, GDP, and income. And we also have a new component within here that will take a look at energy burden across the entire community. So we're able to say, this is where we are, this is where we were headed with no new policies, this is where we're headed with the particular set of measures that were selected by the user. So the intent here is not to have like a super accurate energy model, although we're pretty happy that it does a good job, but it's really to take a look at the impacts of clean energy and of choices that we might make on clean energy for the community over the course of the next couple of decades. So as noted, that's going to demonstrate value beyond just CO2 reductions, although you will see that. That's definitely present within the tool. And it can help communicate to people around what is this going to cost, what kind of a payback should we expect, what are the benefits going to be to the community, just try to help have a more informed discussion overall. Okay, so the next slide takes us to the demo.
All right, I think we're going to have to swap screens, Matt. So we might need your help, Mike, on any tech around that.
What do you need me to do?
Oh, it looks like Matt figured it out.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Better lucky than good sometimes. So this is ACES here. ACES, as you can see, is Excel-based, so it should make it pretty easy usable for most folks who have a little bit of familiarity and access to Microsoft Office. What I've dialed in right now to give a baseline here is a business as usual scenario. So you'll notice all of these values are set to 0%. So this means we're not trying to deviate or change the future. And the major takeaway from that is what you'll see on the right. So where does that get us? And so there's this gray block of conventional energy, so that's coal, gas, and nuclear, and this little wedge of renewables. And any energy efficiency that happened here was what they would call naturally occurring. It's what the market was going to deliver all on its own without any additional policy. And so this gets us essentially to what we were looking at before. About a quarter of the energy is coming in as renewable and 3/4 is not. And that is explicitly explained right here. So you get this pie chart to say 77% is coal, gas, and nukes, 21% solar, 2% other renewables. ACES does not allow you to fail it makes it so that you have to hit the 100% target. So the way that that's being done in this case is through the purchase of renewable energy credits. And so just the total amount of energy that needs to be offset with renewable energy that's being done through the purchase of renewable energy credits from the national markets. So in that case, we buy almost 1.4 million renewable energy credits. I have some breakdowns here on the transportation side as well to see gasoline is still by far the dominant source of emissions for the transportation sector, and that is driven by conventional passenger vehicles. Overall, this gives us kind of our major takeaway from the emissions standpoint. So there's a very minor reduction expected, but it's 48% down from 2005. So if we were looking to hit a Paris climate target, that's easily been achieved, but it's mostly done through cleaning up the grid or moving away from coal that Georgia Power has done. The major takeaways down here get reported in this report card. So this will be a little less interesting since it's mostly a bunch of zeros since we've not modeled any policy here. The major thing to highlight, or that I want to highlight anyway, so is the equity outcomes. So today in Athens, the energy burden averages about 7%, a little over 7%, which is above the threshold for being declared energy burdened, which is about 6%. And you have the note over here to say the Georgia average is 4.9. So you can see it is higher in Athens. Under 2035 with no changes, that's going to increase. So we saw that electricity is increasing as a total amount of the money leaving the community. This is a part of that story. So the overall energy burden increases to 7.5%. If we dial in the scenario, we scroll back up to all of our inputs here. And let's say we do one that's heavy on electric vehicles, solar deployment, and electric energy efficiency. So let's max this out. So if we kick this to 100%, this is the equivalent to about a third of the homes in Athens cutting their electricity use in half. Let's give the commercial guys a little bit here too. And we'll kick up the solar. And then
Matt, I want to flag there's a little bit of a delay between you're making the adjustments and when it's popping up on our screen. So you might want to just move a little slowly as you're scrolling through.
I will take a breath. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then you'll note that I also just switched the renewable energy credits to be Georgia-based. So at least if we're buying them, we're going to be supporting Georgia renewable energy development. That gets us solar and efficiency, and then electric vehicles was the next one to highlight. So 2% is what's expected right now. If we set in place policies that made that much more aggressive, 15 might be a bit. Oh, sure. Okay. So if we created an annual growth rate of 15%, we would get 21% of all light-duty vehicles in Athens would be electric vehicles by 2035. So sorry if this causes motion sickness, but we'll scroll back up to the top and see what it means. So our new outputs are showing energy efficiency is achieving a lot for us now. We're now offsetting more with energy efficiency than we are generating with renewables, but there's still a portion being met by conventional energy. If we come down and take a look, what that tells us here is energy efficiency is meeting 40% of the 2035 demand. 20% is being met by solar, little sliver coming from from that hydro that's on the grid. But we still have about 40% coming from coal, gas, and nuclear. And then you can see that that cut the number of renewable energy credits that we needed to buy by about half. We're down to about 700,000 now. These numbers should all be a bit lower than they were with the electric vehicles coming into place. And now we can see that there's a 29% reduction in emissions from what the baseline forecast was. So what would this mean for Athens? Well, we see that there's benefits of $11.4 billion from this particular pathway. That's coming at a cost of $429 million, so it's not free, but it's a net benefit of $11 billion. So there's a benefit cost ratio of about 27 to 1 from that series of choices. Some more details here around electric vehicles, as well as the amount of renewable energy deployed for folks who want to get deeper into that. The energy equity impacts of this so just to reemphasize, under the no new policy, no change case here, the energy burden was expected to increase to 7.5%. With this particular set of policies deployed, this set of technologies deployed, we get to 6.3%. So there's a reduction in energy burden of a little over a percentage point. And then we take a look at what it means for the economy. So this pathway would create almost 10,000 jobs. So that's almost equivalent to another UGA workforce. You'd see an increase in incomes of $1.4 billion, which is the equivalent of another $640 per resident of Athens per year through 2035. The GDP increases by $480 million, which is about 8% of Delta's revenues. If we take a look at the public health impact, there's about a $300 million benefit there, which is the equivalent of a $13 reduction in your monthly health insurance premium. And the CO2 benefit is about 6.2 million metric tons. So as far as equivalencies go, I always like this one, trying to envision, no cars on the road at all for nearly 2 years. That'd be 23 months without cars. And then the last piece that it gets reported out in ACES here is the impact on bills. So there's $328 million in household energy bill savings. That may not be super relatable, so we try to break that down a little more here. So it's saving about $1,000 a year, or about $86 a month for the people who are accessing, so the people who are getting solar installed and that are getting that energy efficiency work done. And then interestingly, we see also bill savings for people who don't get into those programs. As you can see, it's about a tenth of what's happening for the people who are in the program, but it's still about $9 a month savings. And that is savings that would actually be spread across the entire Georgia Power service territory, because these are reductions these are energy savings that are making it so that more expensive plants do not need to be built by Georgia Power to meet the demand. I always like to put a little caveat on this, though. The model is assuming that we have a fully rational process as a part of the planning here. And these are part rational and part political decisions that get made. So there's likely to be some deviations from that kind of a result playing out in reality over the next 15 years. Okay. So with that, I think we can bounce back over towards the slide deck.
Have you got it?
I can't see what you're presenting. I don't know if other people can. If it's just a problem on my side, I will. Oh, there we go. That pinged in.
Okay, great.
So the next slide should show us. Megan, can we go to the next slide?
The next slide, do you mean the previous
utility
slide?
burden map? No.
Can you see utility burden mapping?
Yes, please. It may just be a lag on my side.
Can others see it? It's a slide with a few maps that's labeled utility burden mapping intro.
Yep. Up now.
I can see it now, Megan.
Great.
Thank you. So this is just a brief introduction here to this. We're going to have a much deeper conversation on utility burdens in November. But this is to set a little bit of context around what the average household is paying for their electricity bills, for their gas bills, for their water bills, and how that relates to the rest of Georgia and the U.S. So there has been some work that's gone in here to be able to characterize this at a census tract level for the county, and you can see that on the map. What we were finding is that as you saw in ACEs, the overall energy bills as a percent of income is higher in Athens than it is for the rest of the state on average. Coming in, the electricity bill comes in at 6.1% of the income, which is 2.5 times what the average American pays and 1.5 times what the average Georgian is paying. And the map here gives us an idea of what that spread looks like. So we've got the map on the left is showing what's the average, so what's the median electricity burden by census tract, and you can see that it's most concentrated there right in the center. And then the map on the right is showing you the actual number of households that are living at or above the Athens average. So the darker the color, the higher the number of households is that are dealing with high energy burdens in that particular census tract. So as mentioned, we'll have more time to dig deeper into this in the near future, but wanted to tee this up as one of the ways that, one of the main ways that equity is being considered and investigated as a part of the analysis portion of the plan. Okay. With that, I think I pass it back over to Megan.
So when people see, I just want to make sure my slides are advancing. Are you able to see the discussion of ACEs and planning practice slide?
Not yet.
All right, let me try one more time. I think having some Wi-Fi issues. Just a moment. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to walk through and discuss what we just saw. and allow for some Q&A around the tool. Or I guess before I go into guided discussion around those questions, does anyone have any questions around what they just saw for Matt?
Well, I've had some more detailed technical things because this is my nerdy stuff that I do a lot as well. And should I maybe take that separately offline with them later on? You know, that's just more just for me to understand better what it's about. I don't want to hog up too much time.
We do have about 10 more minutes left in our allocation for a Q&A around the tool itself before we delved into a discussion. So if there aren't objectives, we could have Matt pull that back up and go through a few of those technical questions if there are no objections.
You wouldn't have to really pull it up. You could just talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so, you know, again, this is Tom Lawrence. I represent U.S. Green Building Council, but I'm also on mechanical engineering faculty at UGA and do a lot of energy modeling myself on building wise. Just to, I assume is right. I think it's right. You know, the energy data you talk about consumption, that was for the county as a whole, right? It's not just ACC government and all that. And then specifically where I'm kind of going with that is UGA included in part of that, or is this separated UGA out, or what? And, you know, then a bigger part question is, you know, can they be brought on board to help contribute toward that?
Mike, is it all right if I take a stab at that?
Absolutely.
So this is Andrew Saunders. I'm going to turn on my video. Before I was in this role, I was involved with the development of both the resolution and the plan, and then have been working closely with UGA Sustainability on various initiatives that they have. I would say that the resolution is intentional in not addressing that. So there is a community-wide goal, and it is my hope that UGA will find itself as a part of the community and eventually find reason to step up to this. And I think one discussion this group will need to have will be what level of engagement is had with the university and in what format. But functionally, we need to acknowledge that the local government can compel the university to do nothing, or almost almost nothing, because they are a state entity, and that applies to the school district and the very many authorities like the hospitals and others. And so I think that's really going to be a focus of our stakeholder engagement. I would also offer that if we reach out to stakeholders that we have no authority over, and they basically say, cute idea, we're not interested, good luck. That's not, I mean, that's happened in other communities. Personally, I would not advocate that we exclude their energy use and their behavior from what's happening in the community, because in my opinion, situations change, whether they be political or economic or technology driven. And even in my experience working with UGA on solar projects, both of us really, 6-7 years ago, this was kind of a hypothetical of what would this look like. And then the market has changed so dramatically that it quickly became, well, how do we operationalize this? And I think we'll continue to see that even if there's not a political or community or environmental motivation for the university, at some point there will be an economic one that won't be ignored.
Yeah, so is UJ energy data included in this ACES model output now, or is it separate since we're not really including them? And yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. It is included.
Okay.
So their consumption is included and it's accounted for.
All right. You know, I actually have had I know Kevin Kershey there very well, and I do a lot of work with him. So I've actually talked with him a little about this in the past. So, Andrew, if kind of, you know, if you're looking for volunteers to work internally, I could maybe take up that too as well.
Yeah, I think that could be an important part. In my experience, there is commitment from university staff at various levels, from facilities, physical plant, to sustainability, to some of their faculty and so on. It also seems like policy-wise, the university sets policy at a different level. At a minimum, it tends to come out of the president's office and many times out of the board of regents. And so personally, I don't know that I'm convinced right now that turning those gears lower in the system will do much of anything to influence what is first and foremost a policy decision at the top. And so I personally have just looked for opportunities to collaborate and share information, even if the two organizations' policies differ, knowing that time changes, and ultimately we'll all look around and say, let's move forward on this. So it's been an issue. I've been intentional about not trying to force the desires of our commission onto other partners because we just don't have those tools.
I understand. I fought those battles internally myself. So,
but I think definitely some coalition building, even if it's beyond the development of this plan, always can help to bear fruit in the long term.
Okay. And I had just done one other kind of just a quick question. When you talked about, we're going through and doing the presentation on ACES, you were talking, you set 100% of the potential for community solar PV or household, solar PV. I mean, how you talked about doing some analytics on ACC buildings, and she had that one map that popped up the ACC properties, but how did they do that with the county as a whole? How was that done? I'm just curious.
Sure. Yeah, so pretty similar process right out the gate. Satellite LiDAR data. We assessed every rooftop using those technologies and ran those against technical screen. So we were able to determine what a median level of productivity ought to be from a panel installed in Athens-Clarke County.
Has joined the meeting.
Anything that was going to perform 25% or worse, then that median score was dropped from the technical potential. So that kind of sets our baseline.
Okay, yeah. So you did this. You did this for every building, not just the ACC buildings, then.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Cool. I missed that part.
Oh no, I didn't say it. You didn't miss it.
Okay. And you might have missed my house adding it last November. So anyway, thank you.
I think I would have done the pool.
Yeah. All right, thank you. That answered my question. Thanks.
This is John with Joma, and I just had a quick question along the lines of the UGA energy use. Does the energy burden include the student population?
It does, which is what we think is the driver for. So the center of Athens, there's two census tracts that are the two highest energy burden neighborhoods in the entire state. And we think that that's in large part driven by the presence of student housing in those areas.
But aren't they, I mean, especially if they are UGA student housing, aren't those students not paying for that? So
there's
directly paying?
Parts that would be, I think for some. So the information that we get back from the survey data is what the total bill pay is for that particular survey respondent. And so that's aggregated and collected, but in neighborhoods where you might have a high student population that say was living off campus, they still would be responsible for that. And the associated incomes is what's kind of tipping us off to thinking that that's likely driven by students, because you see income levels that are down $5,000 to $10,000 a year for a number of those areas.
Okay, Megan, can you take us back to the energy burden map? what I was going to mention is John, you raised one of the questions that we also saw internally with this as we map through. I think part of what we're doing as a group is also assessing and trying to determine as we move through some of those factors that may influence what we see in our data. We did recognize that a couple of the data, the census tracts, were suspected of being, we're pretty strongly convinced that those are influenced by students. But as you move into other census tracts, it begins to show what we would expect, more in line with what we would expect for that income level in that census tract. So I think that is something that we need to be cognizant of and also try to do what we can to address.
Along those lines, Matt, didn't you have some other data points that you could overlay on those census tracts, like SNAP benefits or percentage of households that had health insurance that could help winnow out the student populations?
Yes, there is other information around that, and I'm sure that in the upcoming conversations that will go much deeper into this, we'll have an opportunity to dive a little more into that.
Can you remind me? I know that we picked 2 additional equity-based criteria, or criteria to analyze how energy use trends across different outcomes. Can you remind me what those 2 criteria were, Matt?
So we also looked at asthma rates and households receiving SNAP benefits.
So Michael, those 2 were picked, SNAP in particular, with the broad assumption that if your parents are paying your energy bill, you're probably not that likely to participate in the SNAP program. And asthma was picked because it crosses races and economic classes, yet might impact those differently. So we felt like that was a fairly neutral assessment point for the county, whereas the SNAP benefit was intentionally trying to exclude how students might skew the data.
Yeah, just on that front, like the tract that has the highest energy burden is showing a SNAP beneficiary rate of about 10%, and the highest level in the county is up at 34%. So it's close to being in the middle. There were 2 tracts that we suspected to be particularly influenced by student housing. The other one is only got 4% of the households as SNAP beneficiaries. So it does give us a little bit more to play with.
Are there any other, or Maggie, were you about to speak? Okay. Are there any other questions around the tool before we delve into our conversation?
No, I had one more question, and this is kind of a very weedy and technical, but the inclusion of energy storage in the renewable count, how does that not double count solar? And how do we know that energy storage is being used primarily for solar, though I think that's probably a fair assumption, and not for, just transferring, on like a time of use plan, for example, cheap energy to daytime energy.
Sure. So there's a couple of reasons there. One is that there's regulatory and legal barriers that stop a lot of that kind of activity of just charging the battery off of the grid and how you can use it with your home. there's current barriers in place around that. And then with the model, we explicitly are modeling the adoption of solar plus storage systems. So there's a certain amount, even when you dial it all down to zero, there's a certain amount of activity expected to happen regardless. And you see that in the tool. It's still showing 700 homes getting solar plus storage regardless. And then it's as you increase the pursuit of it that we see more of those systems deployed. So the unit economics are in the tool in ACES, it's only looking at solar that is, or storage that is tied to a solar installation. And that they're both coming together to just reduce the overall home or business energy consumption. So it's more about when it's used than it is the total amount of generation. So it's set up so that it won't dispatch both and count the same kilowatt hour as 2 kilowatt hours.
Maybe as a follow-up to that, I mean, so that means that the storage is basically being used up instead of the PV installation exporting it to Georgia Power and just going off to the grid someplace. It's actually just allow it to use it later on. Is that right?
That's right. It's all behind the meter, and the economics are driven in that direction right now, where the payback rates for years have been so low that it made no sense. You know, you would try to keep as much of that used on site as possible. There's currently an opportunity to get into a monthly netting situation, at least with Georgia Power, where you can receive closer to retail payments, but that's limited. There's a cap as to the total number of participants that can get into that program.
Yeah. It's a pretty big cap, though. You know, I'm actually part of it, and it's a pretty big one. That's what I think I was saying on the board here earlier, sometime through the summer, that anything that we should try to encourage us as quick as possible and get people in Athens-Clarke County booked into that.
Yes, yeah. It's about 4 times more lucrative to get in now than it would be from where things were a year ago. But it's still kind of a get it while you can moment.
Amy, sorry.
Go ahead, Amy. No, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think I have what's probably kind of a basic question, and just before I ask that, I would say that I think I would benefit if somebody could point me towards a tutorial or some sort of kind of basic information about terminology, and because I really am not that technologically familiar. But one particular question I had, when the graphs that were showing kind of the source of energy, and I was curious, I don't quite understand what energy efficiency, what that refers to versus solar, gas, coal, et cetera. Versus, I don't quite understand that.
So the efficiency technologies are ways to meet the exact same demand in your home or in your business with reducing the overall energy consumed. So it may be like switching from an incandescent light bulb to an LED. And there's going to be, a 50-watt savings. And so if we take it, okay, how many hours did you use it? Then we can figure out how much energy that one light bulb would save. Or
so
similarly,
are you just making certain assumptions about people's behavior basically in modeling that?
There's a base level of energy efficiency that people are currently buying LEDs. We don't have to force all of that, but you can accelerate it. And so it's looking at how much. So like the National Renewable Energy Lab has recently put together a study that showed that you can save about a quarter of the energy used in the average household in Georgia using more energy efficient technologies that have under a 5-year payback. And you could do that right now. And so it's looking at things like that. How much of this would happen naturally, and then how much can we accelerate that process to get the more cost-effective stuff installed.
And Matt, that included things like washers and dryers and your big equipment in your house as well. Is that correct?
Yep, water heaters, air conditioners, those those are all coming into.
And Amy, what you said exactly what I was getting ready to say is this group has a tremendous amount of talent and expertise, but we don't always share a same common vocabulary. So as we go through these meetings, we're going to encounter words that you may not, or terms or approaches and concepts that you may not have really looked at in depth or even heard before. So I would encourage everyone that if you hear something and you don't know what that means, please speak up at that point and say, explain it. So that we can define that as we go and make sure everybody stays on it, and then we can help. We can talk a little bit more about how we're going to also offer some opportunities. We think to engage more, so we can educate. Because believe me, I can use all the education I can get. And Matt, I do have one thing that I think might be helpful, because I didn't know it until you and I had an opportunity to talk about it. If you look at the ASICS model and you dial everything up to 100%, which of course, you know me, I'm going to poke every button and I push it all the way to 100%. You'll notice there is still a gap of what we would be able to achieve between dialing all of our options up, because those are representing potential within the community achievements. So can you explain a little bit more about what that gap is? In our case, I believe it's like 36% is remaining unaccounted for, so to speak, hanging out there as dirty energy, in essence. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means and why that's there, and what kind of things have to change for that to change?
Yeah, you're exactly right. 36% is what's left over. So we get, about 2/5 there with energy efficiency and another quarter from the renewables, but you've got 36% remaining. And that's because we're looking at the things that Athens as a community has control over, or could try to exert some control over. So there's just a certain amount of it that, without changes in state policy, whether that's at the legislature or the Public Service Commission, or looking at, Georgia Power's generation plans, that doesn't happen. And so that residual in the model is met through purchasing renewable energy credits, but it serves as essentially a limiting factor. Like we're not going to get past 2/3 essentially without seeing some action at the state level to help us achieve this goal.
So if I understand correctly, for example, Georgia Power has limited how much solar production can occur at a say on a house or on a commercial building. And because of that limitation, that means we can't push more solar from those sources. And that's the kind of thing that would have to change in order to be able to achieve a better efficiency.
That's one thing, that could help. There's also changes that they could make in terms of just procurement of renewables, and trying to buy more that are utility scale applications and get those installed and put on. Yeah, there's a lot of activity in that area now, but we would need to see more of it, quite a bit more, in order to get that last third completed. And you'd really need to see more activity on the storage side to try to make sure that the entire system balanced correctly. So there's some technical aspects there, some financial concerns, and some regulatory concerns that would need to be addressed in order to get there.
Along those technical aspects, I think one thing that's important for us to keep in mind is that the electricity grid may in fact be one of the easier transition opportunities that exist in the energy ecosystem. And that is in fact why in many cases, a recommendation that comes out of these plans is to electrify your buildings and fleet. But even if we were to start doing that today, you're looking at a 2035 and a 2050 horizon. Well, I own a car from 1994 and I fully intend to keep driving it through 2050. And so there's just, even if everybody made the optimal decision today, there's some technological deficiencies that Matt talked about, but there's also this baked in inefficiency within the natural gas and transportation ecosystems, especially, that will require alternatives to offset or overcome.
Kind of to that point about separating out transportation and electricity, I think the resolution states that the community-wide, it was going to be clean and renewable electricity by 2035, and then all other sources by 2050, and that there would be, the ACC was going to meet all of that. So is this tool, can it separate out those different components so that we can look, for example, like a community-wide goal of electricity by 2035 and what that looks like with policies, and separating out the transportation stuff or natural gas for a longer time horizon?
So it doesn't look out beyond 2035, but it does allow us to look at each of those segments. And so obviously the 2035 goal is focused on electricity. So there's more detail into that component within the tool, but there's quite a bit that can be done on the within the tool, looking at transportation and seeing what the effects are going to be. Like, what steps do you want to take in the next 15 years so that you're not trying to do it all in the last 15 years to get there. So it will provide insights on that front. And some of those are actions, we have in here the ability to manipulate the CAFE standard, which is set by the federal government, right? That's a federal policy lever. But we'd seen that changed by the Obama administration and then changed again by the Trump administration. And so the idea here is that, well, do you want to bump it back up to what it had been in the prior administration? Do you think that, whoever's coming in the next 4 years is going to make that choice? It gives a little bit of visibility into what that might do for Athens. And then we have things like electric vehicle adoption, changing commute modes, and trying to push more towards electric and hybrid buses to see what the overall effects would be in the next 15 years of more action in those arenas. Similarly, with natural gas, we've got residential and commercial efficiency opportunities identified, and those can be modified as well within the tool. Sorry, Megan.
Oh, thank you, Matt, for finishing that thought. I hate to interrupt this really good, deep, thoughtful discussion, but I do want to make sure that we have time to transition into our next topic area. So we'll absolutely create more opportunities to have this level of discussion around ACEs. But for now, I'm gonna around the technical aspects of ACEs, but now I'm gonna move us into the next portion of our discussion around using this tool in our planning process. And I think the conversation we just had is going to help provide some fodder for this next conversation. So first, I just want to ask, does anyone have any initial thoughts or questions? And I'd also recommend, if possible, when you're speaking, please turn on your camera so that we can see your lovely face. Right. Since this question does feed a bit into each of the following three questions, I'll go ahead and move on to those since they're a little more specific. But please, we know this is a tool containing a lot of information, both between ACES and the utility burden analysis. So please jump in with any level of question you have, and just to start our conversation. And we're gonna keep this moving throughout the next couple months to make sure we're able to really discuss this comprehensively. So next question was, what about these tools really resonates with you most? So when you were seeing it, what were you thinking? What really hit home for you as you were listening to some of these data points that were being discussed?
Amy Kassane here. I think the two things that kind of popped out to me first was just the economic arguments that Matt presented at the very beginning. You know, the amount of money that goes out of the community versus what might come into the community, job creation, that sort of thing. And I think that stood out to me just because I think that's something that will, you know, resonate with the general public as we start to try to educate the public about that. And then, you know, the energy burden thing to me is a really, I think, a very tangible, again, thinking about the public, just a very tangible way to share with people why it's important to do what we're trying to do. So again, it kind of comes back to the economics. I mean, for me, obviously the environment is very important, but I do think those economic arguments are the easiest thing for people to understand. So.
Thanks, Amy.
And piggybacking on Amy's comment about the energy burden, I thought it was very, very interesting to see that the primary benefits in the reduction of the energy burden obviously went to the people who participated in either or were able to participate in the energy efficiency measures or solar installations. And so, you know, seeing that, you know, that stark difference, I think is an important component to how those policies might get directed or best directed.
Thanks, Mike. As a kind of an extension of this question, I know this is a very dense analysis of sorts. So when I was also wondering in terms of things resonating with people, were there things that you saw that just made it maybe hard for you to understand or piece together what's trying to be communicated? Because we really do want to be ensuring that we're communicating this well, both to the CAB and to everybody. So if there were any thing that you found difficult to understand or that you thought could be presented in a more compelling way, please chime in here if you can.
Well, I've already admitted to not being all that. I mean, I do think there's a lot of concepts that are challenging. I mean, honestly, I don't know exactly what it means to buy energy credits and why. You know, fundamentally, buying energy credits from Georgia better than, but I don't. I mean, I know how credits work in some other things like housing, but I don't know if it's the same sort of thing. So I have no clue what that means. Direct purchase NPV, I wrote that down. I think I heard Matt say what that stood for, but so I mean, I just think, you know, I think the average person, again, if we're talking about going to the public, is not going to have a, you know, a very strong understanding of just the whole energy field, you know, and how things work. And I think that, so I think that's something to keep in mind, you know, as we for the CAB. I don't know about other CAB members. I'm not sure, you know, what people's. I'm sure it's a variety of levels of understanding, but certainly for the general public, I think for sure.
For a short-term step for us, would it be helpful if we provided a glossary of some of these terms in the CAB folder?
That'd be great. And if there's a tutorial, so there's a video out there somewhere, feel free to send me to that. So thank you.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you.
Amy, you kind of bring up something we've been talking about internally, and we want to test the water, so to speak, and see how people feel. But we had talked originally about having more than a monthly meeting, but we didn't want to burden people with multiple meetings. We're trying to be respectful of the hectic schedules everybody has. So we were wondering about dropping in one, or if we needed to, more meetings in between the meetings, but they're more informal. They would be for discussion purposes. There may be a period where y'all communicate, we have this need for this kind of tutorial or this kind of information. We try to put together a history and some definitions that would help, and then we just open it up to discussion among all of us, kind of a more free-flowing opportunity, a little bit like what we were doing here at the end, and get feedback and thoughts. And it's only, you wouldn't be quote required to come. It would be more of a situation where come if you can, or if that's a topic you want to know more about. So is there an appetite among the CAB members for us to address that? That would be my first question, to pursue that. And the second is, then help us know what your first topics you would like those first topics to be.
Well, I'll chime in here real quick. I think that might be a good idea, and maybe you want, in terms of the topics, you had that kind of beginning of the session. You're saying this month we're going to focus on buildings, and this month we're going to do and maybe have a separate that during that month the set aside or the extra, or what do you want to call it, is focusing on that particular topic. That just thought.
This is Andrew. Would it be good for this group if we sent a follow-up survey? Because when we say, like, what do you want to learn? If I've learned anything from coming out of a forestry background, I'm more concerned about the things I don't know about. If I knew what I wanted to learn, I would have probably learned it. Would it be okay with this group if we sent a follow-up survey with a series of topics, and you could kind of indicate your personal interest in learning more about those? And we could also just leave a fill in the blank, like, hey, I really don't understand how fuel moves through this community, or whatever that might be. And then in that same survey, you could also indicate your willingness your interest in participating. And we certainly understand, for instance, if we're doing energy efficiency, some of you could actually lead that discussion or are experts in that. And so you may look at that topic and be like, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. I got other things I need to do today. But if y'all are okay, we'll follow up with a survey to kind of judge interest and particular topic area. And the whole point here will just to ease this onboarding process before the tougher policy decisions need to be made.
I like that idea, Andrew. And I have just a quick question to pose. When we fund housing projects, affordable housing projects, all of our agencies that are utilizing that funding do practice energy efficient practices. But, we also serve the low income community. A lot of them are renters, and we have a lot of rental properties in Athens-Clarke County. And do we have an idea or a plan in place that's going to incentivize landlords, low-income homeowners, multi-family residential properties to get on board with this and invest the money that it's going to take? Or are they going to get some type of credit incentive? I'm just wondering what we're going to be able to do to get everyone on board, especially people. I mean, we may be able to step in to some degree to help with the low-income households, the homeowners, but I don't know how impactful we could be on the general landlord population out there.
I think that would be an excellent topic for a deeper dive. The answer is yes. There are tools in that quiver. They range from incentives. We actually established a funding mechanism last year that could be a carrot that is placed on the table. We also were able to work with the utility company and the Public Service Commission to include Athens in a pilot project where energy efficiency measures are applied to the meter and not to the owner necessarily, which means that when wise energy efficiency measures are made and savings are available to the person who pays that bill, they also indirectly would pay for the improvements. And so I know that can be a tremendous tool for good. It could also be a tool for abuse. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point that we might want to spend 30, 40 minutes just saying, here are some tools that are available, going from the carrot to the stick, and here's kind of the quick and dirty on what we evaluate the impact of those tools to be and the scalability of it.
Thank you.
All right, great questions, everybody. I'll move on to the next question, which is flipping this one over more towards how do we think stakeholders are going to respond to this and community members. So what, beyond what you found interesting or had difficulty with on this presentation, when we're talking about using this to talk to the community, what do you think, like what strikes you as things that we need to make sure we're keeping in mind? And what do you think they'll be finding most compelling? Are there particular data points we should be really lifting up when we talk about this? Are there some areas that you think are just going to be really challenging for people to access? Any general thoughts you guys have in your initial reactions would be great for addressing this question.
Well, I think people will most likely focus on what's it mean to me, what's going to cost me, or what kind of benefits I'm going to get. So that summary, even if nobody participated, I'm going to say was it $9 a month or something like that, those kind of things, that's what people would probably focus on. But then also they might look at, and is a kind of the question I had when you talk about doing the RECs, and you're going to purchase X hundred thousands of RECs, the question would be, who's going to pay for that? Is that all, how's that going to happen too? Or I could see some people asking that.
Oh yeah.
Well, Megan, I'll go back to what I was questioning about earlier. Is a lot of your population are renters, so they're not going to really have much of a say or voice in this process at all, unless they have a really good relationship with their landlord. Most people would probably love to save money and have more energy efficient housing, but you've got a good population that's just not going to be able to have an impact on this, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Melinda.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, in terms of what people will think, I mean, I do think, general education, I think people will be interested in what are the actions that they can take, how can I improve my energy efficiency, not necessarily not with the big things, but like Andrew or Mike were talking about or I guess Matt was talking about just the smaller things, you're buying a new appliance, make sure you get an energy efficient appliance. But then I think, what is like, kind of maybe this is all one thing, but what will this plan do? Will there be help available? Either education help or actual financial help for certain residents of the community to, funding to help them invest in more energy efficiency. So I think in that, the help available, how does the plan help me? What will the plan do? Individual actions that people can take right now. And then what are those bigger things if you can afford it, because that's one of the things that to me that I feel like in terms of purchasing solar and stuff like that, there are people who can afford to do that and people who definitely can't afford to do that. So I think we need to keep in mind that yes, a lot of people do is going to benefit some of our lower and disadvantaged community because they need it the most. But there's a responsibility on the other hand for the people who can't afford it to go ahead and contribute to that sooner than later. So I think we should keep that, how we communicate that. I don't know, but I think advocating to that part of our community to take that responsibility seriously is, I think, an important part of what we need to do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, true. I will not repeat what Amy just said. A lot of my comments was similar to hers. I believe the education and definitely starting with the low hanging fruit, like Andrew mentioned about the LED lights, maybe even with the education, start small with certain, with certain parts of the community where we know, based on the income levels of those communities that maybe not be able to readily afford the bigger things. Start with the smaller things and then move the discussion forward in terms of the how, as maybe as resources become available, or we were fortunate to have the program in partnership with the Sustainability Office at Athens Land Trust, where we are working with the West Broad community. Maybe hopefully that will be duplicated to other parts of the community. But in the beginning, start small. And and educate all of us, because I'm still learning. It's a lot, educate all of us about energy savings, what it means, and then start small and then move forward. But I believe what Amy said without repeating her.
Great, thank you. That's right. So I'm going to go ahead in the interest of time and move us to our next question, but I don't want to limit responses just to the next question. It just seems to tie in pretty closely to what we were just discussing. And this is our final question before we start wrapping up. So feel free to answer this or any other issues that are top of your mind at this point around applications of this tool. So the final question was, how should we use these resources in our public engagement work? And just to kind of get your minds rolling on this, in different settings I've seen in other cities, some cities might put up this model in a town hall meeting and run through it as a demo, which I think works a lot better when it's in person and you have a giant projection screen people can look at and see all of the data points at once. So, but there are some limitations in virtual engagement. So I'm a little bit curious about process for presenting out this information, as well as audiences and who's going to gravitate towards what, or any other feedback you guys have that I haven't specifically asked here. So what are some of your thoughts around that?
So I think that still in my mind, one of the most telling portions of what came out of that demonstration was who the benefits went to, and it went to the people who got solar on their house, and the people who had efficiencies done to their houses or businesses. And so I think that hand in hand with showing that information, there's going to have to be some communication as to how the equity part of it works. And I think that has to be communicated right from the beginning, because otherwise I think people will look at it and say, well, it's just for the people that can afford to, invest the 400 and whatever million dollars it's going to cost to get you there. And so if we don't at the very, very beginning communicate how we bring everybody along, what those policies that Andrew was talking about can be implemented, then I think that we're going to lose a lot of people right from the beginning.
That makes a lot of sense. Any other thoughts? We've got a few more minutes left for discussion if needed.
Well, only, I mean, just the very practical idea of presenting this tool in a virtual format like we just did. And I think that if that's what we're forced to do, I do think a demonstration, where you can really see the practicality, where people can actually see that you've changed X amount and they understand what that change means when you're putting putting the information into the tool. But then maybe the output, the results, maybe you're going to have to do one per screen, versus having everything on one screen. I mean, that's just a very practical kind of thing. But I think, what are the different outputs, and just have a different screen for each one. Because I mean, I couldn't even really see. I mean, again, it would be a lot nicer to be able to do it in a room with, big, huge screen that people can see everything and you can really talk about it. It's definitely hard when it's remote, I think. And it's hard also, you can't see the room to see, are people just have blank stares on their faces? Are they getting it? And so, here, going back to the presentation, I mean, maybe something that's like a Facebook Live where you can really you can see people can react and, do question marks or do claps or do whatever, somehow where you can kind of gauge the audience a little bit and what they're, I think that's going to be really important if we have to do this remotely.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
And once again, coming from the background I'm coming from, we're going to have to look at ways to financially assist those in lower incomes to be able to achieve even the low tier efforts. Many of them, I think of appliances and stuff, a lot of them buy used because they can't afford to buy new. So we have to always approach it with that mindset that some people can't just afford to walk into a store and buy something energy efficient and high or decent. They don't have the money to do it. They need it, but they don't have the money. So we definitely are going to have to look at that perspective of how can we aid those in the lower income brackets to achieve this as well.
A participant has left the meeting.
Okay. So some of the priorities I think I'm hearing that I just want to repeat back to make sure I'm capturing them accurately are the need to really address the issues around low income access to some of these investments and addressing some of these landlord-tenant issues for renters, as well as just increasing the accessibility for people to be able to, when we're adapting to a virtual engagement strategy, being more cautious with our terms, clarifying some of these things a little more clearly, and also thinking through a better way to present some of this information visually, since it is kind of hard to process on the screen. And that some of the just absolute priority items to talk about for discussion is what are some of these low-hanging fruit that people can access now, some calls to action, and there's something else there, and just delving into utility burden more. Am I capturing these general themes accurately? Please chime in and add to this list if I'm missing anything.
Yes, and I'm thinking this through in my head, but even like I was stating, as we were working with the West Broad community, as we are, we've installed HVAC and water heaters and things like that. Maybe ask some of those residents if they would want to be storytellers, as well as get them up to, because we've done the work for them, but we haven't educated them on this. They know it's for savings, but to really bring it full circle for them in a way that they may be able to be a face and a voice for other people who might, be more apt to listen to this presentation now that they see that they've had things installed. But it still goes hand in hand with many of them will need resources. Other people who would want to sign on and be interested, they will want to know, how can I get how can I get help with getting that type of energy savings, appliances and things like that. But I think also some storytelling along the way from different neighborhoods, actual people in Athens, who've had solar put on and what that actual savings look like in tandem with the tool being shown. Like those numbers could be those people's actual numbers. They can say, this is how it's changed my life or how much we saved. And, by doing that, we were able to do this, that kind of thing. So I believe maybe some storytelling would also might be another creative way to to do this.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, it's a little, just speak loudly so we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, it's a little comedic over here. Okay. I just really wanted to say how much I agreed with what Tawana just said. I think that storytelling piece is just so key. Anything that makes it feel real to people within the context of everyday life, like not something that is this big far off goal that we all have to work towards and will attain someday, but something that kind of brings it right here and makes it more grabbable and touchable. I think so many people touch on this, but I think language is a big part of that. Finding a way to simplify it and make it as accessible as humanly possible. So ideally, this is something that people start to talk about at the grassroots level, as Tawana was just sharing. This is something where, you know, someone around the dinner table or driving in the car says, you know, I was in that meeting and we had that conversation about XYZ. And in that way, this information is then spreading across our communities.
That's Crystal.
One of the things that I heard among what everybody else has mentioned is we need to start the process as if you don't know anything. That would be helpful for me as well, I will admit. And that, whether we're the cab or the public, we just start off as if this is a beginner course for all of us to learn. And for those some of those who have been in it a long time, like Tom and Andrew, y'all might have to tolerate it as we learn. But I think we'll all get there a lot faster, and I certainly will feel more like I know what I'm doing or thinking as that process progresses.
Along that line, I guess I was curious about the, I guess it was the mailer and the radio spot, and is that something, because I think that those, you know, obviously the mailer, I'm not sure how that would be used, but that might be somebody's very first exposure to this whole thing. So I don't know if those have already been fine-tuned, or are we going to talk about those, or is that later on, as we're not really there yet? So yeah.
These things they're coming down the pipe, so we can dig into them in greater detail next month when we're presenting out our overarching stakeholder strategy, and we'll make sure that's on the agenda for further discussion. So we've only got a couple minutes left, so we'll try to wrap up quickly. And Andrew, Mike, Maggie, please chime in to help with the wrap up if there's anything I'm missing here. But today we did review our progress to date and went through the topic areas for the next year. Quick reminder, you can absolutely reach out to Mike and Maggie if there are other items on your radar you want covered. We outlined a process for CAB review and feedback, and we presented out on ACEs and utility burden as the first part of a longer conversation. In terms of follow-up items from today, we'll be following up on this call with a locked version of that Excel file of ACEs that Matt walked through, so that you can do a little plug and play on your own to look through different scenarios, as well as some materials on the Athens utility burden study that Matt alluded to. And you can enjoy those materials at your leisure. We'll also be sending a form that will ask, are you interested in having a follow-up discussion on this in the next month with us? And we'll schedule that ad hoc. It'll be more informal. And in addition, that form will include the same list of questions we teased out today, so that if you have any further reflections after this has sat with you a little bit, or you've reviewed any additional materials, you can go ahead and fill that out and send that our way, just so that we can make sure we are scheduling that follow-up meeting. We'd like your responses by next Friday. And we'll get moving on scheduling that. We'll also follow up with that survey Andrew and Mike referenced to get a better gauge on what topics for additional education would be valuable to y'all, so that we can get the ball moving there. And then next up on the horizon, we have our September 15th CAB meeting, same day of the week and time, 2 to 4 on Wednesday, September 15th.
It's a 16th.
Oh no!
I just was checking my calendar, and it's a 16th. So. No big, but yeah, it's a Wednesday.
Thank you for catching that. There had to be one incorrect value in a PowerPoint, or else it wouldn't be a good group presentation. So we'll have that on September 16th, and that's going to focus on an introduction to our proposed public engagement plan that we'll walk through and discuss with you further. Mike, Andrew, anything else you want to add? Or do you want to go ahead and wrap up when you're ready?
All right. Again, just saying, send any information or any requests for topics or things we could do. We will send out the survey, but also if you have ideas, shoot them our way. That we're always looking to incorporate those. And again, thank you for spending 2 hours of your day with us today. It has been very helpful, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We will see you next month, if not earlier.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Has left the meeting.
Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Has left the meeting.
Bye-bye.
Megan O'Neill.
Has left the meeting. Has left the meeting.